Gilligan's Island was meant to be a harmless escape, a light-hearted comedy with coconuts, castaways, and cartoonish mishaps. But behind the palm trees and canned laughter, something far less innocent was happening. One of the show's most beloved stars kept quiet for decades. She smiled through interviews, waved to adoring fans, and played her part perfectly, all while knowing something no one else did. When the truth finally surfaced, it changed how people saw everything. The cameras may have stopped rolling long ago, but the real story never ended. The truth that Dawn Wells hid for decades would leave anyone speechless. She started being asked questions about drugs, sex, religion, and interracial marriage, and she was very aware of how unusual that was. When you're young, you don't think your parents know anything. From the moment Dawn Wells stepped into the role of Mary Ann Summers, she captured the hearts of millions. Sweet, grounded, and endlessly kind, Mary Ann was the girl next door everyone wanted to be around, a perfect counterbalance to the glamorous Ginger. But while the audience fell in love with her charm, very few knew the pain Dawn was hiding behind that sunny exterior. Unlike some of her co-stars who came in with major film credits or Broadway reputations, Dawn was still finding her footing in Hollywood when she was cast. She was grateful for the opportunity, but quickly realized she was not being treated as an equal. Behind the scenes, she was often overlooked in press coverage, sidelined in promotional material, and paid significantly less than other cast members. Even though fans adored Mary Ann, the network often pushed Ginger as the face of the show. Dawn never publicly complained. She played her role, hit her marks, and smiled through every interview. Years later, she admitted that the lack of recognition quietly wore her down. She once said in an interview, "Mary Ann was the heart of the show." But they never wanted to admit that. It was always about the glamour. Even more painful was how frequently the media compared her to Tina Louise. The press latched onto the idea of a rivalry between Mary Ann and Ginger, a narrative that was not just exaggerated but actively harmful. It followed her for years, sometimes overshadowing her actual work. The question of Ginger or Mary Ann became a pop culture punchline, a simplification that ignored everything Dawn truly brought to the show. For Dawn, it was a constant reminder that no matter how hard she worked, she would always be seen as second best. Off camera, she often felt isolated. Many cast members had their own cliques or routines, and Dawn, being the youngest and relatively new to the industry, found herself retreating inward. She later said the loneliness was something she never really talked about, not even with close friends. Yet, despite the difficulty, she kept going. She believed in the power of the show and the importance of her character. She understood that Mary Ann meant something to people and was determined to give the audience her best, even if it came at a personal cost. The rivalry the media loved to stir up, however, was far more bitter and personal than anyone realized. By the second season, the supposed competition between Mary Ann and Ginger had become tangible. The tension between Dawn Wells and Tina Louise was so palpable that even the crew could feel it. While fans debated who was more attractive or who wore the better outfit, something far less playful was happening behind the scenes. Tina Louise had come in with a clear vision of herself as a serious actress, trained in the dramatic arts and with feature films under her belt. She believed Ginger Grant should be the central focus. When audiences connected more with Dawn's approachable charm, Tina reportedly felt slighted. Cast and crew members recalled that Tina wanted the spotlight and did not appreciate sharing it. Dawn, on the other hand, was eager to get along. She genuinely admired Tina's talent and professionalism and made several attempts to break the ice, but each effort was met with coldness. Tina often isolated herself, kept her distance during breaks, and rarely socialized with the rest of the cast, sometimes leaving set immediately after filming her scenes. The contrast between the two women could not have been starker. Dawn was cheerful and outgoing, always taking time to sign autographs or chat with fans. Tina was distant and formal, often keeping to herself unless cameras were rolling. While that dynamic may have worked on screen, it created growing resentment behind the scenes. The rest of the cast quietly picked sides. Bob Denver and Alan Hale Jr. tended to support Dawn, while Jim Backus remained more neutral. Privately, several crew members believed Tina's attitude was causing a rift that was splitting the team. An unspoken rule emerged. Keep the two women apart unless absolutely necessary. Years later, when asked about Tina Louise, Dawn took the high road. "I tried," she said. "I really did. But sometimes people do not want to be friends, and you have to respect that even if it hurts." That small, carefully worded comment revealed more than most people realized. But that cold distance was only the beginning. The tension between Dawn and Tina soon became part of something bigger. Tina was not the only one Dawn struggled to get along with. The entire cast had its secrets, and the atmosphere on set was about to turn even darker. While the public saw a light-hearted sitcom full of slapstick humor and coconut radios, the reality was far from a tropical paradise. Beneath the laughs and palm fronds, the cast faced clashing egos, off-camera power plays, and simmering emotional burnout. The tension was everywhere, not just between Dawn and Tina. Bob Denver, the man behind the lovable Gilligan, often played peacekeeper, but had his limits. Though close with both Dawn and Alan Hale Jr., who played the skipper, he frequently clashed with producers over creative control and script quality. Dawn recalled that Bob sometimes refused to say lines he thought were poorly written, frustrating the writers but earning respect from his co-stars. Alan Hale, known for his booming laugh and fatherly presence on screen, was the same off-camera, a stabilizing force who tried to keep the mood light when tensions rose. He was one of the few cast members who maintained good relationships with everyone, including Tina. But even his positivity was not enough to keep things from boiling over. The real wild card was Jim Backus, who played the wealthy and eccentric Thurston Howell III. While his character was charming and goofy, Backus was unpredictable off-camera, especially when alcohol was involved. Some crew members quietly referred to him as a two-faced presence, capable of stirring trouble even when the cameras weren't rolling. Jim Backus could be funny and warm one moment, cutting and cruel the next. Whispers circulated that he belittled crew members, played mind games with younger cast, and sometimes showed up in no condition to work. Dawn, as the youngest main cast member and new to the industry, often bore the brunt of his behavior. She never publicly called him out, but in an interview once hinted that certain actors acted like they owned the set, clearly not referring to Denver or Hale. Even small things, like dressing room placement or billing order in credits, became points of conflict. The set often felt like a minefield, and despite her professionalism and positivity, Dawn had to constantly navigate unspoken hierarchies, bruised egos, and emotional landmines. It was not just a sitcom. It was a pressure cooker, and the cracks were starting to show. Amid the fractures and shifting alliances, a personal connection quietly developed behind the scenes, one that almost tore the group apart. For all the ego clashes, nothing rattled the set quite like a whispered romance that no one wanted to address publicly. It was never confirmed in tabloids and no official statement was made, but according to those close to the production, something was happening off camera. And it was not just a simple crush. Rumors started early in the show's run. Dawn Wells and Bob Denver were very close. They shared inside jokes, had private conversations between takes, and were known to leave the set together more than once. Some believed the chemistry between them on screen was not just acting. The tension arose because someone else on set reportedly had feelings for Dawn. While she never named names, clues in later interviews and memoirs suggested another cast member may have been quietly competing for her attention. This unspoken triangle caused ripples felt by nearly everyone on set. Dawn later admitted there were crushes on set, and some people handled it better than others. She chose her words carefully, never implicating anyone directly, but her tone hinted at deeper complications. Romantic tensions were more common behind the scenes than fans ever realized, especially in such a tight-knit and isolated filming environment. By the second season, the mood had shifted. Certain cast members stopped talking between takes. Others became possessive or jealous when Dawn interacted too closely with particular people. While Bob Denver kept things light on camera, insiders said he sometimes seemed protective of Dawn in ways that went beyond friendship. Whatever the truth, it caused friction that never fully healed. Relationships that had once been warm grew distant. Smiles for the cameras felt forced. The friendly banter that made the show beloved began to mask real discomfort just out of frame. Dawn was caught in the middle. She never acted inappropriately, encouraged drama, or spoke badly about anyone, but she knew tension was brewing and carried on as if nothing was happening. When the show ended, that undercurrent of jealousy and resentment didn't vanish. It followed her for years, especially during legal battles and betrayals that turned dysfunction from personal to financial. When Gilligan's Island was abruptly canceled in 1967, the cast had no idea the show would become a pop culture icon. Syndication turned it into a television staple, replayed endlessly across America. Behind the scenes, however, what should have been a success story became a bitter lesson in show business betrayal, and Dawn Wells was one of the hardest hit. Despite the show's ongoing popularity, most of the cast saw little to no financial return from reruns. Their original contracts had no provisions for syndication royalties. It was devastating, particularly for Dawn, who had poured herself into the role. While networks and executives made millions, she saw no real financial stability. As the Gilligan's Island brand grew through animated spin-offs, reunion specials, and merchandise, many decisions were made behind closed doors, and not everyone was included. Dawn was left out of several early negotiations for reunion projects, including one special where she was nearly replaced. She fought to be included, and although she ultimately kept her role, loyalty among the cast and producers had fractured. Behind the scenes, quiet accusations of betrayal surfaced. Some cast members reportedly made backroom deals to secure higher pay or better billing, even if it meant cutting others out. Dawn later admitted she was shocked to discover how easily alliances collapsed once money was involved. One painful realization came when a co-star she trusted had undercut her during contract discussions, securing more favorable terms at her expense. Publicly, she remained graceful. She never named names or lashed out, but in interviews, there was often a flicker of sadness in her voice when discussing royalties or cast relationships. "We were like a family," she said once, until the business side took over. The financial struggles did not end there. The end of Gilligan's Island marked a new chapter, filled with personal hardship, public scandal, and private battles that nearly broke her. Life off-screen proved just as challenging as the pressures on set. To the public, Dawn Wells would always be Mary Ann, cheerful, humble, endlessly optimistic. But behind that image, her life was far more complicated. After Gilligan's Island, Dawn's career slowed. She took occasional TV appearances and stage roles, but never regained her previous fame. Behind closed doors, life became an uphill battle few people anticipated. One shocking moment came in 2007 when Dawn was arrested in Idaho during a routine traffic stop. Police claimed they found substances suggesting drug possession in her car. Headlines implied the wholesome image of Mary Ann was shattered. Dawn denied wrongdoing, explaining the items belonged to someone who had borrowed her car. She pleaded guilty to reckless driving. No drug charges were pursued. The incident damaged her reputation, but it was just the surface of a deeper struggle. By that time, Dawn was already facing severe financial hardship. Despite decades of work, she had little savings. Dawn Wells had been quietly supporting her aging family members for years. As acting roles dried up, her income became unpredictable. By 2018, news broke that she was in such dire financial straits that a close friend had launched a GoFundMe campaign on her behalf to help cover medical expenses and basic living costs. Fans were stunned. How could someone so beloved, a woman whose face had been on televisions across the country for decades, be facing this kind of crisis? Dawn, ever the professional, was initially embarrassed by the fundraiser. But when over $100,000 poured in from fans and friends around the world, she broke her silence. In a rare statement, she thanked everyone who had contributed and admitted she had been humbled and overwhelmed by the support. It was one of the few times she spoke publicly about her personal hardships. Even during these challenges, Dawn never lost her grace. She continued appearing at fan events, signing autographs and sharing stories from her time on the island. Yet those closest to her say the pain was never far beneath the surface: financial stress, health concerns, and the quiet ache of being forgotten by the industry she had helped define. Even in her later years, There was one part of her story she guarded closely, the truth she never fully shared, the one that left fans wondering, what had Dawn Wells really been protecting all those years? In her final years, she began opening up, not in dramatic headlines or tell-all interviews, but in quiet, heartfelt moments. She published a memoir, appeared at fan conventions, and gave candid interviews that hinted at how much she had carried over the years. It was not bitterness she shared, but something deeper. A need to finally be seen, not just as Mary Ann, but as the woman behind the character. She spoke about how exhausting it had been to live up to the wholesome image that followed her for decades. People do not want Mary Ann to grow old, she once said. They want her frozen in time, barefoot, baking pies, and smiling. But Dawn had grown old. She had lived through heartbreak, financial ruin, and personal betrayal. And through it all, she had kept silent to protect the fantasy that fans loved so much. There were moments when she let the mask slip. In one interview, she hinted that there were things that happened on set she would never talk about, not out of fear, but because she did not want to tarnish anyone's legacy. Everyone has their own truth, she said quietly. And some stories do not need to be told to be understood. Fans often pressed her to speak more openly about her feud with Tina Louise or rumored mistreatment by certain cast members. But she always demurred. She believed in loyalty, even to people who had not always shown the same courtesy. Her silence, in many ways, said more than any direct accusation ever could. Yet there was one thing she made abundantly clear. She never regretted playing Mary Ann. Despite the personal pain, the missed paychecks, the isolation, and the tension, she saw the role as a gift. "Mary Ann is everything good I wish I was all the time," she once said. She gave people hope, and maybe she gave me some too. Dawn Wells passed away in 2020, during a time when the world was already grieving so much. Her death made headlines, but what truly stood out was the flood of tributes from fans, fellow actors, and even those she had clashed with. They all said the same thing. She had been kind, gracious, and deeply loved. But one question remained unanswered. What exactly had she kept to herself all those years? What truth did she never say out loud? Perhaps we will never know. Maybe the island's biggest secret was not buried in the sand. It was carried in the heart of the woman who played Mary Ann.